ASLT Productions is proud to present an original work, written, recorded, and performed by A Silly Little Time. A dramatic reading of the screenplay, March of Tin. Fade in from black. A tense battlefield scene. Snow falls placidly. A low shot of trampling rodent feet. Horrible squeals and guttural screeching can be heard, the thunder of thousands of feet. The mangled, bloodied corpses of what were once toy soldiers in brightly colored uniforms are trampled underfoot by the mob of vermin. Cut to toy soldiers in brightly colored uniforms laying prone in position in their trenches. Each one is staring down the sights of a World War I-era rifle. An air of dread and terrible apprehension hovers over the camp. Cut to the toy soldier lieutenant in a tricorn hat, bedecked with medals, epaulets, the whole 9 yards. We can see that he has an eye patch and terrible scarring of the exposed skin. He appears at the oncoming horde through a spyglass, curses, lowers it.
Hold the line.
There is palpable unease. Close-ups on the toy soldiers' faces, their red cheeks pale with fear. Audible weeping from some, stony faces on others. Cut to the onrushing wave of screeching rats. Rodent teeth gnash, black eyes shine with glee, maws wide, screaming in animal hate. Cut back to the toy soldier lieutenant, breathing heavily, teeth bared.
Hold.
Cut back to the rat horde. Sickles gleam, foam drips from slavering jaws, awful, inhuman war cries issue from their ranks as they hurtle towards their foe. Back to the lieutenant, his face contorted in rage.
Hold, damn you.
A moment of silence as the tide of vermin cascade towards the toy soldiers' embankment. The toy soldiers are woefully outnumbered, and both sides know it. The rat shock troops leap in slow motion, blades raised above their heads as they come in for the kill. Close-ups on the terrified toy soldiers, tracking the feral rodents in their sights. Cut to close-up of the lieutenant. Slow motion shot of him screaming, "Fire!" Spittle spraying from his lips. Cut to an eye-level panoramic shot of the front lines. Time resumes its normal pace. The toy soldiers fire their first volley. Rats are hit in midair and land on the snowy ground with a thud, arms flailing. The rat horde presses onward, some reaching the first lines of prone toy soldiers. A massacre ensues. Hand-to-hand fighting commences between the toy soldiers, encumbered by their unwieldy rifles. The rats are mostly armed with rusted revolvers and blades. Utter chaos. Cut to a shot of a toy soldier skewering a rat with his bayonet, only to be taken from the back by a large rat who sinks its gnawing teeth into his neck. Blood sprays and the toy soldier screams in pain. Cut to a shot of a swarm of rats descending on a prone toy soldier, their cleavers rising and falling. Aerial shot of the battle line. The rats are getting pummeled by rifle fire, but their numbers are too great to make a dent. Slowly but surely, the toy soldier position is being overrun by a liquid stream of vermin. Cut to a close-up of the lieutenant, frozen in fear and breathing hard, surveying the situation before him. A lone toy soldier dispatches a rat with a rifle shot, but cannot reload in time to fend off the fallen rat's fellows. He screams as he dies in slow motion, pierced by the rat's rusted knives. A close-up of the lieutenant. His one good eye refocuses and sees new horrors. A fallen toy soldier, still alive, screams as his innards are pulled from his chest cavity by chittering rats. The rats eat his steaming guts greedily, stuffing them in their mouths. Dead rats and toy soldiers lie crumpled in the trenches, with rats pouring over the barricades, trampling the dead underfoot. Cut back to the horrified lieutenant, utterly frozen in shock and horror. As if underwater, we hear, cutting through the din of battle, someone shouting. Continued close-up of the lieutenant, unresponsive to the carnage, still breathing heavily. Louder, less muffled, a voice screams.
"Sir! Your orders, sir!"
Continued close-up on the lieutenant, beginning to snap out of his daze. This time the voiceover is crystal clear. Cut to a POV shot, where a toy soldier is screaming at him and shaking him by the shoulders.
Sir, please, your orders, sir. They've broken through the front line, sir.
Close-up on the lieutenant, gathering his wits. He's about to address the toy soldier when we hear the crack of a pistol fire and the lieutenant's face is splattered in blood. The lieutenant recoils instantly, and the toy soldier that addressed him slumps dead against his chest, the back of his head a bloody pulp. The lieutenant pushes the body off of him, snarling, and squares himself away.
Retreat! Retreat!
Cut to a wide shot of the remaining toy soldiers scrambling up from their positions, turning to fire as they retreat. Some leave their guns behind in their flight of terror. Rats descend on some unfortunate toy soldiers as they start to flee. Cut to black. A scene within a makeshift officer's planning tent. Inside, gathered around a table covered in maps and papers, are the following: the toy general, several toy captains, and various toy aides-de-camp. The toy general is seated, fuming in silence over the latest report on a sheet of paper. From the entrance of the tent, an aide approaches.
The lieutenant is here, General.
Enter.
The toy lieutenant shambles forward from the tent's entrance, blood still spattered on his face. His tricorn hat is askew, and he is disheveled. Despite this, upon reaching the general's table, he salutes shakily. The toy general puts down the report.
Damn you, Lieutenant. Ma'am, 500 men, damn you, and you come back with what? How many wounded? How many dead?
Ma'am, please.
I don't need you to tell me. You realize how much we needed that position, don't you? We will be overrun in a day without that line of defense.
Yes, ma'am.
Here's what's going to happen. We don't have the men to repel the vermin when they come swarming. Bring the phone.
General, you're not going to them.
I'm not.
Aides bring in an oversized rotary phone. The general motions, and the aides deposit it on the table before the lieutenant.
You are.
But, General, the price they demand.
If it means that we don't get to see what our insides look like while we're still alive, that's a price that we're all ready to pay.
The lieutenant casts his eye around the assembled captains. We cut to their faces, all stony and resigned. The lieutenant, having lost his composure, chokes out a strangled sob. Cut to his shaking hand, picking up the phone receiver and dialing. Cut to a sleek, black rotary phone with a silver skull design on a small end table. It rings twice, and a black-gloved hand reaches down from off-screen to pick up the receiver. Cut to a close-up of the lieutenant, clutching the receiver to his ear, eye wide in panic, darting about. Shakily, he speaks.
Hello?
A moment of uneasy silence as there is no response on the other line. Moments pass, and a look of relief washes over the lieutenant's face. Just as he is about to set down the receiver, a voice answers. Lieutenant. The lieutenant's face drains of color. He opens his mouth to speak, but nothing comes out. Cut to a close-up of the Nutcracker commander's mouth. The skin is deathly pale and the lips are cracked. The teeth are uneven and crooked, but white, strong, and very long. I understand you are in need of our services, Lieutenant. We will be arriving shortly. Please expect us.
When will you...
As I said, please expect us. Our terms are as they have ever been. That being said, there will be a small increase for the short notice.
Yes. All right.
Very well. Have them laid out. A bientôt, Lieutenant. The line goes dead with a short burst of static. The lieutenant is startled, then slams down the receiver. He casts a wary glance at the general, who stares back, ever stone-faced. Cut back to the Nutcracker commander's mouth, a tight, close-lipped smile. The camera turns slowly, 180 degrees, and pans out without revealing the upper portion of the Nutcracker commander's face. The camera pans out to reveal the Nutcracker commander suspended upside down by the ankles. The skin of his body is pallid and tight, whipcord strong muscle throughout. His chest is flayed, revealing the cavity that would contain his organs, were there any. Inside the Nutcracker's chest is a mess of pistons, gears, springs, and other mechanical workings grafted onto a discolored, throbbing heart. Hands coming from off-screen are meticulously tightening bolts, dabbing what little blood there is with gauze, installing new gears, etc. Cut to black. Fade in from black. A wide shot of a toy soldier encampment, miles back from the broken front line. Colorful standards flutter in the cold wind. There is snow on the ground and a tense silence as the toy soldiers go about, making preparations and performing their duties. Several toy soldiers huddle around a weak fire in various states of incapacity. Some have arms in slings, others' heads are bandaged. There's not a smile to be seen, and any laughter is forced and too loud in the silence. A toy soldier standing guard at the camp's perimeter slouches on his rifle, disheveled and inattentive. He cleans his fingernails with a small knife and absently looks about. His eyes wander about past the camera, suddenly going wide. He freezes midway through removing a splinter from his knuckle, and we see a thin stream of blood begin to flow as he stares off at a fixed point. Cut to a low-angle shot, about knee-high, off at the point at which the guard stares. There is a thicket of trees, dark and impenetrable. A pair of feet, clad in tall, black jack boots, mince toward the camera. The owner moves gracefully like a ballerina, unearthly and lithe, cat-like. The boots stop in front of the camera, step together, and the heels click together twice. Out of the darkness, more pairs of jack-booted feet seem to glide out of the thicket and stop behind the first pair of legs and click their heels once in unison. Cut back to the toy soldier guard, eyes wide and walking absently through the meager camp. The camera follows him as he absently makes his way through the tents, cooking fires, racks of rifles, supply crates. He walks slowly but deliberately, looking slightly past the camera with a 1,000-yard stare. Cut to the tent of the general. She sits on a chair in front of the planning table, drinking from a steaming mug, eyes unfocused, bodies stiff. Toy captains are gathered in small knots, muttering to each other, shooting glances about, poring over maps and reports. The same toy soldier guard from before gropes aside the tent's opening. He steps inside and places himself in front of the general's table. The captains fall silent and rest their gaze upon him expectantly. The general stares at the toy soldier guard over the rim of her mug.
They have arrived. Yes, ma'am.
Cut to the camp outside. A knot of toy soldiers huddled around a campfire rise slowly to their feet, transfixed in terror on the off-screen procession. Ordered ranks of black capes swirl soundlessly in the winter breeze as they march smoothly in time through the camp's thoroughfare. Toy soldiers peek their heads out from tents, eyes going wide, some mouthing, "Great Maker preserve us," as they look on in horror at the eerie procession. We are now in the middle of the procession, looking on as we march behind ordered walls of tall, black conical hats from the back, black capes streaming behind. The silence is broken only by the soft, rhythmical padding of the column of eerie, black-clad newcomers walking down the thoroughfare, led by one in the very front bearing a great black banner with indistinct insignia. The general, her advisors, captains, and attendants have arrayed themselves in front of the general's tent in an ordered line, general in front, standing stock still, breath steaming in the cold, tense and alert. There's a clearing in the camp, ringed by tents and storage carts. A close-up on the general's mouth and neck. Her lip twitches involuntarily, and she quickly clears her throat to cover it, throat working. The sound of marching feet can be heard growing louder from off-screen, drawing closer. The marching is very close now. There is an eerie ululation, a hoarse voice like metal on metal rasping out a short command in an unknown language. Close-ups on powdered, pompous toy soldier captains, gulping in fear or feverishly mouthing silent litanies. The marching is heard in our immediate vicinity and stops suddenly. There's a single click of boots, en masse, and a single ululation. Profile shot of the general, stepping forward reluctantly and looking upward. From off-screen, a long, black-clad arm extends down to her, proffering a spidery hand in a black leather glove, palm down. The general reaches out slowly, deliberately, and with great reluctance, brushes the knuckles of the hand with an obligatory kiss of reverence, and pulls away a little too quickly. Still off-screen, the voice of the hand's owner speaks. "Well met, my dear general."
Well met,
Commander.
Commander. General. We are too familiar for such formalities, are we not? Violet? The general flushes violently and clears her throat, unable to look the commander in the face. The hand retracts. Now there is nothing to be seen of the commander as he speaks just off screen. As you wish, General. As I've come to understand, you have something of a rat problem, yes? A nervous titter from the assembled captains behind the general, dying away immediately with a sharp gesture from her, not even turning to admonish them.
The Rat King and his forces have broken through the eastern line. We had 500 men stationed there. Butchered to a man.
The lieutenant from the opening scene is standing behind the general. His face sours, and he exhales a shaky breath.
Reserves are not expected from Toyland for another fortnight. Old men and boys at that. Our intelligence reports suggest that a great host of the Rat King's forces are only 2 days' march from where we stand.
You cannot hold, you cannot retreat, not over the mountains, no, indeed. What a pickle you're in, my dear Violet. The commander clucks his tongue condescendingly. The general stares up at him pleadingly, hating, begging. Quite a pickle. Well, General, dear, it has been wonderful to see you again in the flesh. May I speak to the one who spoke to me over the phone? Wonderful conversationalist. It's a shame he didn't see fit to put you on the line to say hello. The lieutenant blanches and stays silent. The commander lets out a peal of raucous laughter, cackling and strange. Don't be shy, I don't bite. Not without cause. Come now, speak up. The lieutenant steps forward, eyes downcast. Good man, good man. What a way with words have you, my friend. Have your man here take me to the material. I trust you have no shortage. Although the rats may have gotten away with a good portion. A pity. That may restrict the services I can provide. Cut to a low shot of the commander, visible only from the chest down. He is tall, wiry, clad in a black double-breasted coat with silver death head buttons, tight black trousers, a black cape with silver embroidery, and black leather belt with silver buckle. The hilt of a saber hangs from the belt, along with a drawstring purse and a ring of keys. He claps his black-gloved hands together crisply. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let us go, Lieutenant. I'll return to you shortly, General, once I've made my appraisal. The lieutenant turns quickly to the general, mouth working wordlessly. The general nods curtly and tips her head, gesturing off-screen. The lieutenant gulps and beckons haltingly to the commander.
This way, Commander.
Cut to the inside of a large, dimly lit tent. There are beds and cots, all of which are bearing bodies. Some are shrouded in white linen, others are groaning in pain, still alive, others curled in fetal position and other states of distress. The tent flap opens, and the lieutenant steps in, holding it open reluctantly. The commander has to stoop to enter, his face still off-screen, above the side of the camera. The lieutenant stands frozen as the commander brushes past him, shuddering as the eerie figure passes. The commander systematically goes to stand at the foot of each bed, towering over the supine figures. Those dead do not react, but the sleeping and delirious shiver and clutch at their blankets or moan. The commander studies the dead, lifting the linens to inspect the corpses, one by one. Yes. 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 No, unsalvageable. Yes. Yes, after a fashion, salvageable. No, goodness no, this one's been turned inside out. These rats have certainly developed an enthusiasm for men, haven't they? No. No. Yes. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. And yes. The commander proceeds slowly to a cot at the back of the tent with a supine figure. It is a young man, blanket pulled up to his chin, chest rising and falling slowly. His face is pale, but he is alive, if unconscious.
The commander stoops, getting on his haunches. We finally see his head. He too wears a tall, conical Shako-style hat. His face is obscured by a silver mask, a grotesque death's head styled in the mockery of a nutcracker's face. Black glaring pits look out of a skull's face. With oversized teeth and a hinging jaw. The teeth part slightly, and from inside the mask, sniffing can be heard, deep and questing as the commander leans in closer to the unconscious man. The lieutenant bursts to life and scurries over to the bed.
No, not him. No, he's not.
No, is it?
No, please, not him. He's not dead.
Well, that I can see plainly.
He's my brother.
The commander rises slowly, towering over the trembling lieutenant, staring down at him impassively.
He's not dead. He was struck by a rat's knife. By the maker, there was a terrible infection. Some filth must have been on the blade. But he fell ill immediately. The wound healed, his fever broke, but he's...
The commander turns his head to the brother on the cot. He draws back the sheet with a long-gloved finger and gingerly lifts the man's stained shirt. There's a puckered scar on his stomach below the ribcage. Ugly, but certainly healed. And yet here he lies. How long?
Almost a month. Almost 2 now. Please don't.
The commander raises a hand to silence the lieutenant. I shall tell you a thing that may give you back this brother of yours. Yes. The commander hunkers down until his death mask is level with the lieutenant. He stares imperiously, impassive. Close-up on the lieutenant's anguished face. Cut to another close-up of the lieutenant, dejected and resigned, outside in the cold again. He watches the black-clad nutcracker soldiers, attired similarly with death masks, carrying off the dead on their stretchers. The last stretcher borne by the nutcrackers is occupied by the lieutenant's brother. The soldiers jostle the body in their transportation, and a pale hand, lifeless, flops out from under the thin blanket. On the 4th finger is a thin golden band. The lieutenant stifles a sob. His brother is carried away with the dead off-screen as toy soldiers look on in revulsion and resigned horror. The commander and general stand across from each other again, the general flanked by her cadre of subordinates. The commander bows low before her. My thanks, and, as always, Violet, a distinct pleasure. The general grimaces. We were able to salvage over 130 all told, with a few replacement parts besides. I have left battle plans with your lieutenant here. The commander's death head turns slowly, its gaze now boring into the pale and queasy-looking lieutenant at the general's shoulder. The general glares at the lieutenant suspiciously. As a token of my esteem, see that he provides them to you promptly. After a drink, perhaps. The poor fellow looks like he's seen a ghost. The lieutenant involuntarily lets out a moan as the commander throws back his head, guffawing heartily. As the chuckles subside, he clicks his heels twice, and his men, standing at attention behind him, respond in unison with one in answer. An ululation sounds, and the nutcracker soldiers begin to march out of the camp. The general stares at him incredulously with mounting dismay.
We've paid. Where are you going?
Battle plans, Lieutenant. Don't forget the battle plans. With a smart turn on his heel, the commander goes briskly away, exiting off-screen and whence he and his men came. We are whisked to the general's tent again, with her cadre clustered about her, anxiously reading over her shoulder. The general sits in her chair, reading a sheaf of parchment. Her eyes are visible over the top of the page, narrowing, widening, backtracking over the text. Finally, she lays down the pages and steeples her fingers, resting her chin upon them in contemplation. The pages are hurriedly passed about by the cadre. We see in a shot over their shoulders that there is text in an unknown language, with small symbols representing troop movements in different colors, black and red. A quick cut to the still face of the unconscious brother of the lieutenant. He is in motion as firelight casts strange shadows upon his face. There is rough clattering of wheels on a hard surface. The lieutenant stirs,
eyes moving under his eyelids, mumbling indistinctly. He inhales deeply and coughs, a deep rattling cough. Small flecks of blood splatter the white linen which covers him up to his neck. Point of view shot from the brother's perspective. We see that he is reclining on a gurney, covered up to his neck in a linen shroud, being wheeled along a torchlit corridor by two figures in red robes with tall, red conical headpieces. The coughing continues. Without breaking stride, one of the figures in red looks over their shoulder at the camera. Its neck moves smoothly, like an oiled joint, with a faint purring of servos. The upper half of the figure's face is obscured by a silver domino mask with extensive filigree and repeating patterns of knives and medicinal plants engraved on its surface. The lower half is visibly female, with alabaster skin, full black lips, and tattoos extending from the lower lip to her chin in 3 vertical black lines. These are the soul shepherds. The first soul shepherd smiles bemusedly at the coughing brother and returns to face away from him, guiding the gurney ever forward down the corridor.
He's awake.
Is he now? Anesthesius didn't dose him properly.
Mother doesn't like them awake. Shall we take him back for more?
I'll ask.
It's always delicate threading the needle at this point.
Well, that's between Mother and Anesthesius. He'll get an earful should it go sideways. As the gurney proceeds, the brother's breathing grows more labored, his moans more pronounced. With a great intake of breath, the brother lets out a wail, a long keening wail of anguish and frustration.
Thomas!
The soul shepherds guide the gurney, turning corridors. Rat carcasses hang on the wall in chains in various states of dismemberment. Black-robed nutcrackers stand in pairs, talking quietly or fencing as the gurney passes. Some stop to stare, their silver death-head masks following the groaning figure on the gurney. One leans in to pinch the passing buttock of a soul shepherd, cackling as she squeaks in protest. Meat for Mother today, eh, Lesia? Awfully noisy, that one. There's general laughter from the small knot of gathered nutcrackers. The brother looks about in wide-eyed terror, blood running from his mouth as he coughs convulsively. The soul shepherd on his left deftly dabs his mouth with gauze, her glittering metal hand shining in the low light. The soul shepherds turn a corner and lead the gurney down the widening corridor to a great wooden door, guarded by 2 gargantuan nutcrackers in black robes and golden face masks of the death's head style. Their pikes are crossed, barring entry. "Whence come you, sisters?" The soul shepherds move away from the gurney and curtsy in unison, heads bowed in deference. They rise.
From Anesthesius, brother captain.
"Wherefore?"
A toy. For Mother.
The guards regard the writhing figure on the gurney. "This one lives still. And you say he comes from Anesthesius?"
Oh, quite so. Most unusual, but Anesthesius insisted. And are we not dutiful, beautiful, and obedient?
The soul shepherds giggle in unison and curtsy once more, less reverently. The guards look on impassively at this display, then turn to look at each other. The silent guard gestures with his head towards the door. With a grinding of gears, the pikes uncross and the door is unbarred. Guard 2 speaks.
Wait here a moment.
The soul shepherds titter and nod their heads in agreement. The second guard disappears inside the great door, which shuts behind him with a resounding boom. The shepherds dab at the brother's mouth as more blood issues forth. His sedative is almost entirely worn off, and he is greatly agitated, squirming beneath the linen covers. His moaning rises to a hoarse scream.
The ticking. I hear ticking. Why is it ticking inside the ticking? Please, oh, make it stop ticking.
The soul shepherds coo and pinch the brother's pale cheeks, dabbing his mouth as he pulls away and thrashes about. The second guard opens both doors from the inside and returns to his post. He nods slowly.
You may see her now.
The shepherds bow their heads in thanks, turn to each other and straighten their robes and fuss with their masks. The brother on the gurney continues his screaming about, the ticking, thrashing about as he is able. The shepherds stand on either side of him and, in unison, make elaborate ritual gestures with their metal hands. Through their weaving silver fingers we see the brother's frightened eyes darting this way and that, his mouth working silently as the pattern continues. A dullness enters his eyes, and his thrashing ceases. The shepherds grab their gurney and briskly wheel it into the room.
We enter a huge cavern, all stone and low braziers with sputtering flames. In the middle distance, there are two large thrones seated next to each other on a raised dais in the middle of the cavern, carved of marble and adorned with scrollwork in silver and black on one, gold and red on the other. The throne of silver and black is empty, but the throne of gold and red is occupied. The soul shepherds have quieted now. The only sound is the faint squeaking of the gurney's wheels as they proceed closer to the occupied throne. We see them come towards the throne from a shot behind the tall marble back, their heads bowed in reverence. A pale left hand, adorned with golden rings and long red nails, is raised, and the shepherds cease wheeling the gurney, bowing repeatedly as they retreat back. The hand lowers and grips the armrest of the throne. A sweet, feminine voice, quiet but stern, issues forth. "Daughters, daughters, daughters, what is this you've brought to me?" The shepherds come forth meekly, heads bowed and metal hands clasped before them.
"A toy, Great Mother. We were given him by Anesthesius after the remaking, whence he bid us bring him to you, for you see that
He still lives, that is known. I could smell his life even before you turned the corner.
A toy, you said? Yes, Great Mother.
He still lives, even after Anesthesius' treatment. Curious, quite curious." The figure rises, lithe and smooth. Small chains clink and bells jingle as she steps from her throne, onto the dais and down the small flight of steps. Her movements are sinuous and sensual, her hips swaying as she walks. The shepherds' heads are bowed still. The brother on the gurney lazily casts a glance at the approaching figure. From his point of view, we see a woman in red and gold approaching, a red hood pulled over her head and hiding her face. She comes close enough to stand at the foot of his gurney. She extends a white arm, taking the corner of the linen blanket in her balled fist. The brother cranes his head, more alert now, staring at her from his vantage point. Smoothly, Mother whisks back the linen blanket, uncovering the brother on his gurney. The brother, seeing the motion, flinches, but feeling no strike, opens his eyes and returns his gaze to Mother. Then, upon seeing what is before his eyes, he starts, and his mouth hangs agape in horror. The brother looks down at what has been exposed by the blanket's removal. He lays naked on the gurney, his chest a mass of flayed skin and dried blood. When we focus on his upper body, we can see that his chest cavity has been hollowed out, like a pumpkin emptied of seeds and scraped clean. In place of his intestines, ribs, liver, and organs, he is a clockwork monstrosity of gears, pistons, ticking and clicking pulleys and shafts, whirring away next to organic lungs and a blackened, bruised heart pumping away in a grotesque tattoo. He begins to scream, long, loud, and anguished, as the shepherds giggle and caress his new implants. Mother, from under her hood, grins condescendingly, and the sharp tips of canines are exposed by the drawing back of her full red lips. "You were right to bring me this toy, daughters. He's made of sterner stuff than the rest of Anesthesius's baubles." The brother continues screaming in terror as Mother glides toward him, kneeling before his face. She nonchalantly lowers her hood, and the brother's screaming dies out as he gazes in horrified wonder. Mother is revealed to be a woman of indiscernible age, unearthly beauty, and beatific calm. Her deep-set eyes are as golden as her long, straight hair, and her high cheekbones, small, plucked eyebrows, and ruby lips are lovely and terrible in equal measure. She is the picture of angelic beauty, unmarred and unblemished, old beyond measure and young for all eternity. Blue veins run from her throat up next to her small chin. "What is your name?" The brother, enthralled with this lovely and terrible apparition, husks out a response with great effort.
Marius, my lady. Please, the ticking. Please."
Mother cups Marius's face with a white hand.
Hush, Marius. What Anesthesius cannot do, I can. Peace, Marius.
Mother leans back, golden eyes closed. She opens her mouth, yawning wider, unnaturally wide as her canines extend. Like a striking snake, she buries her teeth in Marius's neck, the whites of her now half-lidded eyes consumed by the gold of her iris as she drinks deeply from his carotid artery. Marius thrashes initially, his clockwork organs whirring and grating, but gradually, as Mother drinks, they even out to a calm, rhythmic purring. Marius's voice rises from a moan to a euphoric bellow that echoes throughout the throne room, down the hallway where stand the two guards, down the corridors, and into blackness. Fade in from black. A low shot of a toy soldier's corpse face down on the snowy ground. There's a wet slap, and the body is jerked back. There's chittering and the crunch of snow underfoot. The body is being dragged by humanoid rats with great rusted meat hooks, hauling their gruesome prize back in teams. Other packs of rats bear corpses, toy and rodent alike, on their shoulders or on crude biers, forming an unrelenting stream of squeaking, chattering bodies like an ant colony with a particularly large amount of cargo to relay to their nest. Bites of flesh or extremities are freely taken as the salvage teams bear back their quarry. We cut to a great filthy palanquin, where sits an enormous rat, propped up by rotting pillows, gnawing on a toy soldier's arm with great gusto. This is the Rat King, corpulent, foul, and as hideous as can be. His girth is enormous, and rolls of fat are barely held in by the straining piecemeal armor and formerly fine cuts of cloth that swathe his body. Rat attendants stand ready at his beck and call, serving up great piles of flesh on rusting platters. A small rat, covered in bones and bearing a great gnarled staff, limps forward before the Rat King's palanquin. The rat guards and generals hiss and chitter at him, but the small rat bares his teeth and hisses in response, standing his ground. The Rat King tosses aside a morsel of flesh and belches loudly.
Such a feast. Never since my great-great broodfather's time has there been such a plethora of man-meat. Delicious, scrumptious man-meat at that, these toys. I feared they would be made of wood, but they're softer than a pinkling. Speaking of which,
The Rat King shifts, looking about, and snaps his incongruously long and skinny fingers. Two rat attendants scuttle forth, bowing and bobbing feverishly.
Fetch me a draught of the man ale and a litter, no. Make it two. 2 of pinklings. Scurry now, you filth.
The Rat King grabs a severed hand from a pile of meat and lobs it at the attendants, who rush off squeaking. The Rat King laughs raucously, belching and hiccuping in between. The other assembled attendants laugh and titter nervously, but the small rat with the bones and staff stays silent, staring daggers at the Rat King. The Rat King's ear twitches, and he cocks his head to return the smaller rat's glare.
Well, if it isn't Muir's dead speaker come to pay me a visit. Tell me, witchling, did you have a pleasant time hiding in your stinking burrow while your betters were falling on men's swords?
Murish bares his teeth, but genuflects before the Rat King, bones clinking.
Your rottenness, I assure you, I was deep in the far sight when your summons came. Yes, it was no cowardice, I assure you.
Assure me of nothing, witchling. You filth below filth, damn you to the warrens below. Were you not useful, I would have your wormy pelt for a rag to wipe my rathood.
Murish genuflects again, reticently.
Be that as it may, yes, your corpulency, I come with reports of great interest to our campaign.
My campaign.
Your campaign, your rotundness, yes. The men things move strangely after your forces smote them so terribly at their holding. Oh, I have seen much, and mean to tell you of what may be your wideness.
The Rat King thaws somewhat, picking his teeth with a spare tibia. He lets out an exaggerated sigh.
Very well, Murish dead speaker. Tell me what you know.
Indeed, your swollenness, yes, indeed. You are without a doubt aware, yes, of the resounding blow your forces dealt to the men things, yes? We lost many rats, yes, sad but necessary. but reports from our lurkers and runners would indicate that the men-things would be retreating with their tails between their legs. Had they any?
Murish guffaws to himself at his own bad joke, and a few attendants start to snigger when the Rat King shoots them an icy glare. They cease immediately, and Murish presses on hurriedly.
That is to say, my lord, that the men-things have set up camp at the foot of the mountains. Yes, quite strong disposition, yes. Many sets of teeth we would need to gnaw through their defenses, yes. But they are so few in number after your glorious victory, yes. I have consulted the brood fathers in their nests beyond the vale, and they have suggested that we strike immediately, yes.
Unbeknownst to Murish, behind him, several pairs of attendants have arrived, bearing huge platters and cups. As soon as they are in sight, the Rat King begins to sniff the air, losing all interest in Murish and his tidings. As Murish speaks, he is jostled by the attendants and their loads, bowling him over into the snow. Murish rights himself, brushing snow from his bones and trinkets, as the attendants hold platters and great glass bottles before the Rat King. On the platter are mewling, pink, hairless rat pups that blindly step on each other in their confusion. Greedily, the Rat King plucks up a squeaking pinkling with his long fingers and drops it into his mouth.
Yes. Strike immediately. Yes. Perhaps.
Murish, seeing his opening, presses on excitedly.
Oh, indeed, your avariciousness, most wise. The men-things are in no position to stand before your combined might, yes. Were you to strike them within 2 moons' time?
A grizzled rat general steps forward, earrings clinking and pipes up.
2 moons' time, you say, witchling? What dross. We have the man-things on the run. What threat do they pose to us now? I say we enjoy our spoils.
The rat general casts about for agreement. There are mutters of disapproval, but far and away, the bulk of the assembled rat convocation cheers their assent. The spoils of war in man-flesh, not to mention the meat of their fallen kin, have been very pleasant, and reassembling for further battle would put a damper on their celebration. In addition, the cold weather would freeze over the currently tender meat of their fallen, so eating now and fighting later would be preferable. Murish grows agitated, seeing his attempt to curry favor slipping away.
My lord, please, I have consulted the brood fathers. They have insisted in no uncertain terms that we should strike now. Yes, strike now, and tear out the throats of the man-things before...
The Rat King is paying little attention to the squeakings of Murish. He's more interested in devouring the plate of pinklings and sucking down the man-ale. He belches again and beats on an empty platter with a bone, creating a high crashing sound.
Silence! Shut up, the lot of you!
The generals are chastened. Murish falls silent and bows his head, expecting a blow.
Oh, worse than pups you all are. Squabbling and squawking and fighting amongst yourselves. The witchling says attack in 2 moons. Grishnak Bonebreaker says... What say you, Bonebreaker? 3 moons? 4? What? Out with it!
The general bows his head.
Viciousness, I say that my man-killers... Your men-killers have nothing to fear from these broken men-things. I was there, unlike the witchling, and I saw how many of them fell to our blades. There couldn't have been more than a handful that got out alive, and even if, by some cursed luck, they had more on the way, the men-things couldn't dream of standing against your host.
Murish scrambles forward, seething with rage and wounded pride.
You fool on 2 legs, why give the men-things a chance to sharpen their knives at all? We have the chance to rise and kill first, to be done with them once and for all. Yes, and you, in your pride, want to dilly-dally?
The Rat King has grown very weary of the bickering, and deeply regrets addressing the witch at all. In truth, he would much rather eat pinklings, drink man-ale, and hunt down the man-things at his leisure than squeeze back in his armor and trudge through the snow again. He could feel a headache brewing. Whether it's the man-ale or the argument before him, he knows not and cares less.
Enough! Be gone, all of you! I have heard plenty for 1 moon.
The assembly stirs uncomfortably. Murish deigns to speak.
My lord,
Be gone! I said take your half-formed whisperings of the dead and bury them in your rat hole for all I care. Out! Off! Shoo! Leave me.
The generals, advisor, and Murish, despite their rat brains, can read a room. They bow and depart squeaking. Murish mutters and chitters to himself, grumbling darkly as he plods along with his staff. The generals walk back to camp, laughing loudly and squeaking amongst themselves, clapping each other on the back, the conflict with the Rat King forgotten. We suddenly see them from afar, through a thicket of trees. Several figures are outlined in the dark against the snow, one very tall, wearing a conical hat, the other shorter and man-shaped. They study the rats as they cavort through the clearing, and silently break apart into two groups, the tall figure leaping up into the trees, cat-like, and the shorter figures moving to flank the rats. The rats continue their rowdy procession through the thicket, hacking aside fallen limbs and carrying on.
Oh, what I wouldn't give to cut that witchling open and wear his filthy guts for a crown.
Oh, you can say that again, Tekish.
Oh, he makes my pelt crawl, that witchling.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
true, that is. I'm not so keen to go hunting down men things in this bleeding snow, neither.
Oh, you pup, you're dumb enough to freeze solid on a hot day, you
Hey.
are.
Hey, you two, shut your snouts. I smell man things. You smell them?
The generals sniff the air.
Matter of fact, I do smell something.
Yeah. This is some man thingy. Look at that.
The general points in the distance down the way, and we cut to what looks like 3 toy soldiers. One is in the middle with his arms flung around the other two's necks, as if the two are dragging him along. The generals bare their teeth and draw wicked blades, eyeing each other.
Fresh man thing, eh? Sounds awfully good right about now, doesn't it? Oh, it certainly does. I thought my gut would growl out of my belly watching his fatness put down those pinklings.
I say we sneak up on him and cut him from behind.
Oh, where's the fun in that? Let him hear us come. More of a thrill.
The 3 nod in agreement and scamper, knives drawn. The toy soldiers stop and give each other surreptitious nods of agreement. They turn in unison as the rats draw down on them, each toy soldier drawing a sword. The rats form a loose half-circle around the toy soldiers. By bulk alone, the rats have the upper hand, but none of them make a move. They eye each other nervously. Something isn't quite right. What should have been easy prey looks a little too confident for their liking.
Put down your weapons, man things, and we won't hurt you.
Yeah, we won't hurt ya. We'll just kill ya.
The other general is about to speak when blood gouts from his open mouth. There is a gurgle and he slumps over, dead. The other 2 rats look on in stunned silence. A blade bursts from the chest of the far rat, who shrieks and writhes as he is lifted off the ground. The last rat looks up desperately, squeaking in terror as the still struggling rat is thrown to the ground to writhe in his death throes. The tall figure is revealed to be a nutcracker soldier, horribly tall and thin, lithe and deadly calm. The nutcracker wipes his blade on the pelt of the dying rat and towers over the remaining general.
No, not you. Please, not you.
The nutcracker's response is to open his great silver jaws wide, and with a snake's speed, clamps the rat's head in its jaws. We cut to the onlooking toy soldiers who stare in horror as there is a loud, wet crunch off screen. Cut back to the nutcracker, glibly wiping gore off his mask's chin.
Leave the one alive. He'll live a while yet, and he's the messenger if and when he's found.
The nutcracker stalks off into the trees, toy soldiers in tow, throwing back glances at the rat wriggling about in pain in the red snow. The dying rat writhes and gurgles in the pale moonlight filtering in through the tree canopy. The nutcracker and the toy soldiers are long gone. A wide shot. The dying rat lets out a particularly loud shriek. It echoes through the trees. We cut to Murish glumly walking along a parallel path to the generals, muttering to himself darkly. The shriek reaches him, and his notched ears perk up. Murish stops dead in his tracks, whipping his head back and forth, his nose twitching. He picks up a scent and curses under his breath. We cut back to a close-up low shot of the dying rat, blood pooling, breathing shallowly. He's prone on the ground, his murine face towards the camera. Blood flecks his whiskers. We see Murish moving apprehensively through the brush, coming upon his slumped form. Murish curses again and flips the rat onto his back with a grunt. The dying rat groans and coughs up blood.
General, who did this to you? Who attacked you, General? Yeah, where?
The general's death rattle is pronounced. His eyes stare blankly up towards the sky, chest rising and falling weakly. Murish loses his patience altogether and sticks a gnarled finger in the general's wound. The general moans in agony, brings up more frothy blood from his mouth.
Who's they? Them. Black. Deathless. One of him.
Murish freezes, finger still stuck in the general's wound. He draws it out slowly and absently pops it in his mouth. Very carefully, the dying rat forgotten, Murish rises cautiously and draws a small knife from his belt, scanning the tree line. He slinks backward, back hugging the trunk of a large tree. The dying rat's death rattles are weak, but still audible, too loud for comfort. Close up on Murish, his eyes flicking from the general to other points off screen, quietly mouthing litanies to his vile gods. Silently, he drops to all fours and slithers across the ground, moving soundlessly. He sniffs the ground all about, one scent leading him one direction, then another, all the while muttering quiet pleas.
Brood father under the ground, forever may you reign, growing fat on the corpses of your enemies and sons alike. Yes, watch me from below, your feeble servant, as I...
Murish stops crawling, freezing in place. Cut to his point of view. There are 3 sets of footprints in the snow, 3 small, 1 large and heavy. Murish leans in and sniffs intently. He recoils, hissing.
No. 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 No, 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 not them. Not them, please. Yes. No, no.
Murish scurries back to the general, who lays silent now. He looks about and sees the other 2 corpses laying in the snow. Furtively, he slinks towards one of the bodies and scans it. The corpse is sprawled spread eagle, head crushed, features distorted, blood pooling underneath. It's as if his head was crushed from both sides by 2 great fingers. Or...
No.
Close up on the corpse's face, we can clearly see the imprint of great teeth, a human bite mark where they broke the skin from the ferocious bite. We cut to a wide shot of the trees as Murish screams wordlessly in horror, the shriek echoing into the night. We cut to a dark cell back in the stronghold of the Nutcrackers. Marius stands, slumped, staring into space. He's now garbed in the black of the Nutcrackers, but he stands helmless, drool falling down his chin. His skin is now waxy and pale, his handsome features drawn and slightly gaunt. Dark bags are under his eyes, and his hair hangs down over his face. We hear footsteps coming down the hallway, stopping outside his hole. A gruff voice speaks off screen.
Brother Marius.
Marius does not respond immediately. A line of drool falls off his chin, and his eyes come into focus. He looks about, wide-eyed. It's as if he's been woken from a deep sleep.
Huh? Brother Marius. Come.
Marius looks down at himself. He sees his new uniform, and, gaining more awareness, wipes his chin with his sleeves. Yes, I'll come. Cut to Marius walking down a dimly lit hallway, following the Nutcracker sergeant, weaving slightly as if drunk. The sergeant proceeds walking briskly, unaware or uncaring. Marius doubles over and vomits profusely. A black liquid, viscous and shining, shoots out of his mouth onto the stone floor. The sergeant stops, pivots 180 degrees seamlessly, and walks up to his shaking form. Marius gasps and clutches his chest as the sergeant looks impassively behind his silver death mask.
Get up.
Marius tries to rise, stumbles. The second attempt is successful, and he shakily gets to his feet, wiping his mouth on his sleeve.
Come. Quickly now.
Marius resumes following the sergeant down the winding corridors. They come to a large room lit by torches. Incense smoke cascades down lazily from censers suspended from the unseen ceiling. Gathered here are a great mass of nutcrackers, identically uniformed, silver masks gleaming in the low light. They are arrayed rank upon rank, facing towards a raised platform where stands the commander, flanked by several high-ranking nutcracker officers and soul shepherds, standing at attention. The soul shepherds bear silver bowls, censers, and ceremonial daggers. The sergeant smoothly trots to his assigned place in the mass of nutcrackers and smartly stands at attention, hands folded behind his back. Marius looks on in wonder, venturing forward cautiously. The commander's gaze tracks him as he walks in apprehensively, spellbound. The commander speaks, his voice calm but stern.
Brother Marius, you have come. Good, good. Come here.
Marius, as if sleepwalking, staggers down the aisle created by the nutcracker ranks, eyes fixed warily upon the commander. He haltingly steps onto the raised platform before the commander, who towers over him. Marius stares up at him, his mouth parted, tears streaming down his face.
Kneel, Brother Marius.
Without breaking his gaze, Marius sinks to his knees before the commander. Tears run down his face, beating on his chin and falling to the ground. The commander, without looking away, extends a hand like a surgeon awaiting an implement. The bowl-bearing soul shepherd steps forward, offering forth the silver vessel. Serenely, the commander dips the tip of his gloved finger in the bowl. When withdrawn, the tip is covered in an inky black liquid. The commander then traces 2 vertical lines under Marius's eyes, extending down his tear-stained face. Marius shudders and screws his eyes shut at the touch. The commander intones.
Brother Marius, you were given unto us, and forever we shall keep you in our company. As you have been blessed twofold by the clockwork heart of Anesthesius, holder of the key of your life, and by the holy kiss of the Great Mother, she who dispels all ills and unceasing shepherd of your soul, I, the commander of the undying keepers of the watch, do anoint you with the ashes of your frail and useless parts that you had in your mortal life, saturated and made whole with the blood of your imperfect body, drawn forth as it was by the Great Mother in her everlasting wisdom and grace. Marius opens his eyes again to look upon the commander, who has received the ceremonial dagger from the soul shepherd. The commander holds the silver dagger out before him. Reach forth and take from me this blade with your 2 hands. Marius obeys and extends both hands, palms up. The commander gently places the hilt in one hand and the flat of the blade in the other. In one smooth motion, the commander closes Marius's hands around both the hilt and edge. Marius looks on, eyes wide, wincing slightly, as he feels the blade pierce the flesh of his fingers. His amazement is written plain on his face when he realizes he feels no pain from the bite of the steel. Stand and face the congregation, Brother Marius. Marius rises slowly and faces the assembled nutcrackers, still grasping the dagger. Raise the hand that was bitten by your blade and show it to your brothers. Marius unwraps his fingers from the blade of the dagger and lifts it high for all to see. In the dim light, we can see the knife's edge is bitten deep, but only a slow, small trickle of black oil comes forth from his wounds. Brothers, see how our new brother Marius has been released from pain and has been ushered into the eternal glory of our remaking. Ululations sound. Boots stamp the stone floor. Marius, hand aloft, begins to grin. It is the grin of a lunatic growing wider and wider. From the assembled nutcrackers begins a thundering, rhythmic chant of Marius, Marius, Marius. Marius joins in ecstatically, his chanting eventually devolving into an unhinged, gleeful laughter as the commander looks on. Even the soul shepherds have abandoned their poise and are shrieking in excitement, ululating and singing unknown hymns in praise. Close up on the commander as he nods, almost imperceptibly. The forms are obeyed. Now we may begin.
Cut to the toy soldier camp. Palisades have been thrown up hastily around the perimeter, meager fortifications. Toy soldiers are seen carting about supplies, pounding in stakes, heaving logs into place to build up the walls about them. Cut to the toy general in her tent, tapping out a nervous rhythm on the table with her fingers. Cut to the lieutenant in his tent, sitting on the edge of his cot. He stares into space, forlorn. He puts his head in his hands and begins to sob convulsively. looking up and covering his mouth to stifle the sound of his grief. Cut to a tracking shot of Murish as he pads along swiftly, elbowing aside rats who are gathered in a great chittering clump. Murish is forcing his way through the crowd, stepping on feet and trampling tails left and right. He is met with squeaking and hisses, but he is not deterred. He carries a discolored sack slung across his shoulder. It's obvious that there is something wet in the bag, and it leaks scarlet. At the center of the clump are 2 rat warriors, circling each other and thrusting at each other with long, thin rapiers. Both are bloodied and panting, but their duel is still fresh, and they are parrying strikes with animal grace. The Rat King, as ever, is in his palanquin, engrossed in the spectacle, absently chewing on the ever-present platter of human remains. Murish breaks through the front row of the crowd and shouts above the grunting of the duelists.
My lord, a word with you, yes?
The duelists stop and turn on the intruder. They bare their teeth and assume a fighting stance, ready to stab at Murish without hesitation, if given the order. The Rat King snarls in disgust.
Witchling, how dare you interrupt my sport, you filthy...
I apologize, my lord, yes, I do truly. But I must speak with you.
The Rat King is fuming. The duelists turn 3/4, their eyes flicking between Murish and the Rat King.
Your orders, great king.
The Rat King gestures imperiously.
Kill the witchling for its impudence.
The duelists nod in unison and turn their full attention to Murish, edging closer threateningly, rapiers at the ready. Murish reaches into the sack at his shoulder and draws forth a dark, glistening mass. He throws it between the 2 duelists, and it lands at the foot of the Rat King's palanquin. It bounces and comes to a stop. We see that it is the pulverized head of the general from earlier, teeth marks apparent on the pallid skin. The duelists stare in confusion. The Rat King deigns to look down at this gruesome token.
And what is this, witchling? Some kind of jest? What is the meaning of this?
My lord, this was one known to you. Look upon it.
The Rat King is taken aback. He puts down his morsel of raw flesh and snaps his fingers. 2 rat attendants scuttle forward obsequiously and bear the head up to the Rat King, who takes it and turns it in his hands.
This was Gabriel's blood drinker. I'd know those ear notches anywhere. How came you by this, witchling?
The Rat King's amazement gives way to suspicion as his face darkens.
You bring me the head of one of my bone breakers, in an awful state of mutilation, no less, and you think I'll look upon it kindly? Did you kill him out of spite? Jealousy? Speak, filth!
Murish scrambles forth and kneels in supplication, speaking frantically.
Your grossness. I came upon the Bonebreaker and his companions as I was setting back from the audience with your most gracious rodent self, yes, and I assure you that he, Grishnak, and Urkus were dead, very dead, dead as men things in the snow after your victory, yes. I came upon them when I heard Grishnak scream, my lord, and I find them all slain, set upon by the...
The Rat King turns the head about in his hands, studying it.
By the what? Speak!
Murish screws up his courage and shrieks.
By the Black Ones! The deathless men things that do not die, yes.
There's a murmur in the crowd as they cringe. Many rats spit on the ground, others hiss in hatred. The assembly draws back from Murish instinctively. The Rat King stiffens. He regards the mangled head, skeptically, warily.
That is a bold claim, witchling. The deathless men, a curse upon their heads, have not been seen by ratkind since the days of my ancestor, great Viliash the Throat-Cutter. May he watch us from below. What makes you think the foul Black Ones are about?
My lord, your great eyes can see the marks upon the head, yes. Great teeth marks, yes. Not those of rat, not those of things that prey upon us in the dark, but man! See you the imprint of the great incisors?
The Rat King appraises the head again and shifts uncomfortably.
I see that the head is crushed, it is true, but perhaps it was a man-thing's steed that stepped upon it.
No, my lord, the marks are unmistakable. I have seen the bite marks in soul sight through the eyes of my forebears. And the scent, my lord, the scent, it is unmistakable. It stinks. It's the taint of their foul artifice. Smell it, I beg you.
The Rat King, abashed, sniffs the head. He scowls, sniffs again, turning the head. Murish watches on impatiently, breathing rapidly.
The Rat King pounds his fist on the arm of the throne.
Sentiers, come forth.
3 albino rats with pink, sightless eyes and overlarge, fleshy noses grope their way forth, ears twitching, noses sniffing intently. They carefully make their way to the foot of the Rat King's palanquin and bow thrice, and reach their hands out blindly in expectation. The Rat King tosses the head to them, which they catch, fumbling, almost dropping it. The 3 blind rats gather around the head, grasped jointly in their hands, sniffing it intently. The Rat King watches on impatiently, and Murish fidgets. 2 of the rats turn to the 3rd chief Sentier, and chitter in Sentier battle language. The chief Sentier nods and speaks aloud, eyes unfocused, nose twitching. His voice is high and thin.
My lord, the Sentier Coven reports that the object you have provided is indeed the head of Bonebreaker Scabrius, recorded in our scent memory. Upon it we find familiar scents known well to us, and they are as follows: blood, man-flesh, remnants of pipe smoke, sweat, and leavings of rats. However, there is a dark scent embedded in the flesh that is unknown to us. It does not smell of man-things, nor their steeds. As we may closest approximate, great lord, it is a smell of something long dead, but of what we cannot say. Without more information, we may say nothing certain about the fate of Bonebreaker Scabrius, save that he suffered a crushing blow to the head, a blow of great force that killed him instantly. The Sentiers have spoken, and surrender final judgment unto you, great lord.
Murish hisses. Not what he was hoping to hear, but given the information, he may yet convince the Rat King that their enemies have a great power among them. The Rat King twists his whiskers in contemplation, looking back and forth from the head, the Sentiers, and Murish. He sighs and speaks.
Black ones who know something of great power is abroad, and arrayed against us. That much is certain. Thank you, Sentiers. Leave me.
The Sentiers bow thrice and retreat clumsily. Murish steps forth to speak, but the Rat King cuts him off with a harsh gesture.
Enough speculation, witchling Murish. I do not want to hear any more of your mystical mumbo-jumbo about shades from the past, ours or our enemies.
Murish stands mute, seething. He fingers the bone necklace. The Rat King claps his hands together.
Very well. I owe you some gratitude, though, witchling. You've helped me come to my decision.
The Rat King stands, his great bulk rising from his throne to address the rat congregation. The silence is very tense, so thick that it could be cut by a knife as the rats hang upon the Rat King's every word.
Given that our enemies have a weapon or power unknown to us, we will not sit idly on our tails. Bonebreakers, ready my rats for march in 1 moon's time.
The assembled rats cheer in enthusiasm, thrusting their blades and pistols aloft in celebration. Their bloodlust is piqued. Nothing can stand before them. Murish grimaces amid the celebrating rats. 1 moon is better than nothing, but he looks inward and hears the whispered warnings of the forefathers. Amid the flurry of activity, Murish stalks off into the throng, disappearing. Cut to a wide shot of the toy soldiers' camp, now fortified. Palisade walls have been erected, with a main gate, thrown together with fallen logs and cut timber. Toy soldiers stand guard, alert with their rifles. The toy soldier runs up to the gate, saluting the guards hurriedly and speaking indistinctly. The guards pound on the gate, and it slowly swings open. The soldier scout hurries in, and the gate swings shut ponderously behind him. The toy general oversees drills by soldiers within the walls. The captain approaches her and whispers, "Yes, all ears report." "At once, ma'am." The captain trots off and returns with a scout. The scout salutes. "General, I have returned from the perimeter. There is enemy movement in the brush. We have found rats sniffing around, drawing closer every day. I suppose it was only a matter of time. We did manage to dispatch several of the scouts, but some were able to retreat before we could kill them. Thank you, Private. You are dismissed." The scout salutes and departs. The general sighs and addresses the captain grimly. "They found our camp. If there are that many rats crawling around so near, they must know we're here by now. Redouble the fortification on our south wall. Double the guard. We must expect attack at any moment.
Yes, ma'am. Any word from our guests?
The general purses her lips. None yet. The commander's instructions said only to expect them. The captain shifts uncomfortably, casting his gaze about. The troops are nervous, huddled in tight knots around fires, sharpening blades, cleaning rifles. The general rubs her hands, stroking the fourth finger on her left hand absently. I know it doesn't inspire confidence, but the commander is true to his word. He hasn't disappointed before. The captain stands silently, nonplussed. The general seizes her wool gathering and snaps back to attention. You're dismissed, Captain. Thank you. Go about your work. The captain salutes and departs, leaving the general alone to oversee the drilling troops. She wipes her mouth absently and stares off into the tree line. Please, don't disappoint me, Commander. Cut to a wide shot of a great, plodding host of rats arrayed in their battle gear. The Rat King's forces are on the march. Towering bone breakers crack whips, driving on their chittering charges, shrieking commands to press forward through the snow. Rat drummers beat their drums in time, human skins stretched over the rotten wooden frames. It is a vision out of hell. Rats squeak, brandish their rusted knives and flintlock pistols, drooling in expectation of spilled blood. An honor guard escorts the Rat King, clad in rusted mail and bearing wicked swords. The Rat King has squeezed his bulk into a set of filthy armor, mismatched pieces and discolored plate. Upon his head is a great helmet, fashioned in replica of a rat's snarling face. He is seated upon a horrible steed, a humongous, terrible possum, rheumy eyes rolling, frothing at the mouth and snapping at unfortunate rats who recoil in terror. He towers above even the bone breakers, looking out over his amassed forces. The Rat King bares his teeth in a savage grin. In the tree line, the snow falls peacefully. A figure pokes its head out behind a tree. We see a glimmer of silver, a death's head mask. The figure darts away, moving at lightning speed. We cut to the toy soldier fortification. The general stands peering over the top of the gate through a set of binoculars. She brings them down, face stony. She hands the binoculars to her attendant captains and majors. The rats have come. Ready the men. The officers turn smartly and leave, barking orders at the soldiers. We pan out and see that there are soldiers arrayed on the battlements, rifles at their sides, uniforms presentable. The great mass of rats boils forth before the walls, fanning out and nearly encircling the fortification. The rats easily outnumber the toy soldiers 100 to 1. The seas of the rat forces part, and the Rat King proceeds forth on his awful steed. He rides up before the gates and bellows forth.
Man things! Filth! Filth below filth! I deign to give you my name and my title, for there will be none among you to remember it once we have made meat of you all. I am Cutavrush, king of all rats, eater of men, great lord of all warrens, and scourge of all that walk above the sacred nests of our fathers. Who among you would be the least offensive to my greatness? Who would grovel before me and treat with me to save your miserable skins?
The general steps forth on the battlements, attended by her officers. Cutavrush, king of all rats, I would parley with you. I am General Violet Drosselmeyer, Countess of Juatesse, and I stand before you as commander of my forces, against which you have thrown yourselves hatefully and without provocation. I tell you now, Rat King, that I will not submit my men to your non-existent mercy, nor will I surrender command of our position or any goods. I reject any overture of ceasefire, for any promises coming from you and your kind are as poisoned as the blood in your veins. The Rat King laughs aloud and tosses a mangled, gnawed human head before the gate.
Fair enough, Two Legs. I will not waste my time further. I give unto you a token of my contempt, and a warning of what will befall all your pathetic forces.
The Rat King speaks broadly, addressing both the toys and his rats, whipping them up into a frenzy.
Since you have committed to hostility, we will deliver it in full. We will break your bones and suck your sweet marrow while you still live. We will drink deep of the blood that will pour from your jugulars. Our pups will grow fat on the meat from your pitiful bodies. We will cut you down to the very last and use your skin to inscribe the record of our victory.
A verminous cheer issues from the assembled rat forces. They bang their drums, gnash their teeth, and scream in animal hate. The general looks on this horrible display, lip curling. The officers are pale-faced and terrified. Cockily, the Rat King trots back to his host on his steed. The officers on the walls shout commands.
Ready?
Ready?
The officers raise and cock their rifles.
Raise!
The soldiers raise their rifles to their cheeks in unison. The general grimaces and surveys the lines. Good men, but far too few. The Rat King bellows. A seething horde of rats rush forth, shrieking.
Fire!
There's a great crack of guns as a volley is fired. Bullets slam home into the onrushing rats, taking some down, slowing others, some shots going astray into the snow in small puffs.
Fire!
A second volley. More rats go down. The great bulk of the horde is still pressing forward to the barred gates. On the inside, soldiers barricade the heavy wooden doors. A large knot of toy soldiers stand back from the door, rifles ready and blades drawn. The lieutenant is among these men at the front of the line. He is pale and sweating, his hands shaking as he adjusts the rifle's bayonet. The squeaking, shrieking, and screaming of the rats, dying and oncoming, washes over them from beyond the barred door. Rats slam into the wall in a wave of bodies. Some are crushed against the wood. Soldiers fire down into the roiling mass. Rats clamber over the bodies of their fallen kin, knives sheathed or clamped in their mouths. They begin to scale the walls, nimbly finding footholds in the wood. The soldiers atop panic and fire, poking madly at the ascending rats with their bayonets and blades. The rats are deterred somewhat, but for every rat that is warded off, 2 others stream past them, scaling the walls. Cut back to the courtyard. Grasping rodent fingers jut through the crack in the barred door, which sags under the weight of bodies. The lieutenant screws up his courage, and as the commanding officer, amid the frightened toy soldiers, shouts,
Hold! Raise!
The terrified toy soldiers raise their rifles. The door heaves as rats press against it. A close-up on the lieutenant's face, pale and stricken. A quick succession of shots from the opening battle. The rats descend upon hapless toy soldiers. The body against his slumps with the back of its head blown off. Blood splatters upon the lieutenant's face again. Cut back to the present. All sound is absent, save for a steady heartbeat. In slow motion, the soldiers atop the battlements stab at ascending rats. The door heaves again, fingers trying to claw through the wood. A few snouts are seen, rodent teeth gnawing at the door panels. The lieutenant sweats, eye looking down the sights. Regular speed. The door bursts. Rats pour forth, crushed under the weight of those behind them. They squeak as they are trampled into the muddy snow. The line of soldiers in the courtyard open fire, bringing down the oncoming rats left and right. It is utter pandemonium. Atop the battlements, rats make their way over the wall and begin attacking the soldiers in full force. Soldiers stab or shoot a few, but one by one are brought down under the weight of furry, stinking bodies. The general is surrounded by a knot of officers, forming her lifeguard atop the battlements, striking down any rat that comes within range. Quickly, they are swamped by rats, and some lifeguards keel over from the rat blades. The mass of bodies atop the battlement is too great, and the wood platform groans. There is a loud crack, and the platform collapses on top of the stream of rats entering the courtyard, crushing many, and spilling the general, her lifeguard, and the attacking rats into the snow. The lieutenant's good eye widens, seeing this, and frantically motions to his men.
To the general! Quickly!
The toy soldiers under his command shout as they rush into the fray, stabbing and shooting dazed rats that have spilled off the fallen battlement. The general is on her feet, fast as a whip crack, and has drawn her pistol and saber, cutting down and shooting rats left and right as they swarm towards her. Her lifeguard regains their feet and form the same knot around her as they hastily move in unison to usher the general towards the safety of the approaching line of toys, led by the lieutenant. The general snarls, cracking a rat over the head with the pommel of her saber, over the shoulder of one of her lifeguards as the lieutenant and his men form a rough semicircle about her, firing and stabbing away.
Ma'am, there's too many of them. I can see that. We fall back to the camp.
Toy officers bellow orders to fall back. We cut to the ruined entrance of the fortification, rats now pouring over the fallen battlement. Everything looks entirely hopeless for the toys. Cut to the Rat King, mounted on his steed, surrounded by rats rushing forward towards the fort to get a taste of the action. The Rat King laughs with abandon, watching the carnage ensue, knowing that victory can be the only outcome from today's battle. Murish has wormed his way close to him and is watching on as well, daring to hope that the rats may win. All of a sudden, amid the furor of squeaking, trampling feet, and jingling of rusty armor, a familiar ululation is heard off-screen in the distance. Murish's ears twitch. He whips his head about, to and fro, looking for the source. He can see nothing, just the stream of bodies rushing by him. The ululation is heard again, but this time there are many voices echoing it. Murish's ears flatten to his head in dismay. He fingers the bone necklace at his collar and beseeches the Rat King.
My lord, did you hear that? Yes?
Hear what? The sound of victory? Ever so sweet, witchling, ever so sweet.
No, my lord.
The ululations are getting louder, closer, and far more numerous.
That!
The Riffins, hearing the ululations for the first time now. His opossum steed snarls, sniffs, and lets out a great bellow of anger. Cut to the tree line flanking the great rat host. Out of the darkness run black figures, black conical hats crowning their heads, silver death masks gleaming. They charge at lightning speeds with drawn sabers, one in each hand, ululating as they draw down on the unaware rats. Some rats see approaching figures in their peripheral vision and stop, turning their heads to face the newcomers. The onrushing nutcrackers leap high, pirouetting in the air, blades spinning in a deadly circle as they dive gracefully towards the rats. The rats are gripped with dumb, mute terror, and can only watch as beautiful, elegant death hurtles towards them. The nutcrackers slam home into the flanks of the rats, decapitating the onlookers. They roll gracefully and somersault up, blades whizzing through the air all the while as they nimbly cut a bloody swath through the host. An aerial shot. We see black figures darting from the sides and leaping through the air on both flanks of the rat host, hemming them in on both sides. The commander is first among his men, artfully carving up screaming rats as they throw themselves at him with abandon. His flashing blades make short work of all those who come within their range. A frantic rodent aims a rusted blunderbuss at the commander and fires. The shot hits the commander squarely in the shoulder, making a neat hole in his black uniform jacket. The commander doesn't even flinch, his stride unbroken as he bears down on the terrified rat, struggling to reload his archaic gun, and slices him through from crown to groin. Cut back to the fortification. The toy defenders are doing their best to repel the rats, who have pushed them back into the camp, but they are hopelessly outnumbered. The rats fall upon them, skewered by bayonets, blown through by gunfire, but there are always 3 more for every one that falls. The general is surrounded by a lifeguard, the lieutenant, and other terrified soldiers. The position is slipping out of their grasp, inch by inch. All of a sudden, there's a screech from behind the lines of the advancing rats. The rats stop pressing forward, halting, and flicking glances behind them in confusion. The lieutenant whispers hoarsely to the general.
Ma'am, they've stopped. Why have they stopped?
Quiet. There's screeching and chittering from behind the lines, and the rats begin to turn away, panicked. They fall back, retreating back out of the fort whence they came, tripping over the dead as they flee. The general smiles and gasps, her stony, gore-streaked face beaming.
Men, on me, to the field.
The general breaks from her lifeguard and rushes after the fleeing rats. A split second later, her toy soldiers and lifeguard follow, shouting a war cry. Out in the field, it's a bloodbath. Rats descend upon nutcrackers only to be tossed aside, cut down, or stabbed. The Rat King is holding his own against a circle of nutcrackers, cautiously thrusting at them with their sabers. The Rat King is holding his own against a circle of nutcrackers, cautiously thrusting at him with their sabers. The Rat King's giant opossum manages to grab an unlucky nutcracker who, overstepping a lunge, is caught in its slavering maw. The possum crunches viciously on its prize. The nutcracker struggles, but goes limp as sharp teeth pierce its head and torso. The Rat King shouts curses as he rains down blows with his terrible flanged mace, caving in silver masks and deterring others from getting too close to him. Rats run this way and that in total disorganized terror, only to be cut down by nutcracker blades. Murish hides behind a pile of rat corpses, holding his head and rocking back and forth, screaming. The toy soldiers wade into the field, hacking and shooting at frantic rats. The fighting is so thick that the soldiers have dispensed with their guns and are fighting now with their swords and knives. The toy soldiers fall upon the rats viciously, carving a path through the squeaking bodies. They are joined by several nutcrackers who guard their flanks, soaking up minor blows and dealing death with every stroke of their cruel sabers. The lieutenant roars as he dispatches several rats in succession, and comes upon a single nutcracker in a small clearing, surrounded by rat corpses. The nutcracker is surrounded on all sides by wary rats who lunge at him, only to be ruthlessly dispatched. The lieutenant blinks in shock. The nutcracker is unhelmed and covered in small, shallow cuts on his face, arms, and torso. His black uniform jacket is almost in tatters, but still he stands, laughing maniacally as he stabs rats with his short blade. On his finger shines a small golden ring. Even in his butchery, the nutcracker's eyes glide over lazily and lock with the lieutenant's. He shouts above the noise, hoarse with unrestrained glee.
Thomas, good to see you again, brother.
Marius knocks down a screaming rat, and with a swift stomp of his black boot heel, breaks the rat's back. There is an audible crack, and Marius cackles in delight. The lieutenant's mouth falls open as he rushes to Marius's side, fending off blows from rats.
Marius, you're...
No, brother, I'm not alive. Not as you know it, but I'm here.
Marius turns to his brother, batting aside a rat who rushes at him clumsily. The lieutenant is thunderstruck, staring at Marius's changed features. His skin is even more sallow and pale than the last time we saw him. His hair is greasy and hangs down in his eyes in a stringy curtain, if not plastered to his head by gore. Marius's eyes are entirely golden. White, iris, and pupil are gone. A lunatic fire burns in his eye sockets, boring into the lieutenant as he stares at the thing that once was his brother. Marius grins savagely, teeth white and canines long. A rat rushes up behind Marius, screaming, and runs him through with a blade. The lieutenant looks on in horror as Marius bursts out laughing, and whips around to crack the rat's neck with his ring hand. Marius turns back to his brother nonchalantly and, reaching behind him, pulls out the blade from his back and tosses it aside. The lieutenant utters a groan of anguish.
Oh, Marius, my sweet brother, what have they done to you?
Only the best that mother could give, big brother. No pain, no hunger, no fear, only the beautiful music of mother's sweet voice singing in my head and the ticking in my chest. Her kiss is more tender than that of any living woman. Her touch is purest ecstasy.
Marius guffaws and resumes killing rats. The lieutenant stands there, watching his former brother as the camera pans outward. Cut to the commander. The general has fallen in alongside him, and both are smiting rats with their blades left and right. Without missing a step or turning to address her, the commander speaks to the general.
I wouldn't disappoint you, Violet. I told you to expect us.
The general cries out and stabs a rat, which squalls as it dies.
I would have appreciated if you'd arrived a little sooner.
The commander chuckles, deftly cutting the throat of an adjacent rat. Blood spatters his silver mask.
All things in their due time, Violet.
The general grunts, non-committal. She stops and points off screen, elbowing the commander.
There.
We pan back to the Rat King on his steed. He has massed a horde of rats around him and is successfully pushing back a knot of nutcrackers and toy soldiers. The rats are gaining back ground slowly but surely, the giant opossum snapping at its enemies and keeping them at bay.
Our quarry. Come.
The commander whirls off towards the Rat King and his retinue, and the general shouts for a lifeguard. They assemble around her and press forward, following the commander as he cuts a path through rats. The Rat King rains down mighty blows with his mace, crushing toy soldiers and nutcrackers alike.
Filth! Filth below filth! But even you deathless ones can die!
The attendant rats chitter in agreement, bolstered by their king. Yes, the nutcrackers can be brought low, given enough punishment. Only, however, at the cost of a great many rats. The commander leaps and pirouettes in mid-air, landing in the small no-man's land between the rats and the toy soldiers and nutcrackers. The rats hiss and draw back, surprised. The great opossum roars a challenge and sinks low, ready to pounce. The commander, with a flourish, adopts a battle stance and flicks his blades into position to strike.
The general and her lifeguards push through the friendly line and stand beside the commander, swords at the ready. The Rat King stares down at them in disdain and scoffs.
Well, if it isn't the Death's Head himself. And what's this? The Man-Thing Countess playing soldier as well. How convenient. Both of you come to die before me for my amusement.
The general braces herself, sneering up at the gross amalgamation of flesh and armor.
The bulk of your rats lay dead, Vermin Lord. What say you to that?
The Rat King laughs heartily and brings down his great mace with a grunt. It would have crushed the general had she not leapt out of the way at the last moment.
This is what I say, filth!
The Rat King uproots his mace from the muddy, blood-stained earth and swings in a wide arc. The general ducks, and the commander leaps nimbly out of the way.
We can breed another host in short order with the flesh you have given me today. Even our own will do. Waste not, want not!
The commander sprints to the side, dodging another ponderous blow from the terrible mace. He lays low several rats and flanks the Rat King and his mount. The general and her lifeguards are face to face with a giant opossum. It hisses and lunges at the general, who steps back and trips over a prone corpse. With ease, the possum grabs the lifeguards in its jaws and swallows the screaming soldier whole. The possum bears down on the supine general, snapping at her. The general rolls out of the way, but the possum recovers and pins her to the ground with a great pink foot, muddy and smeared in gore. The general gasps as the air is forced out of her lungs. The Rat King peers down and draws back his great mace to strike. He gloats at the general, who glares back at him with hate and terror in her eyes.
Sleep well, little girl. Dream sweetly.
The Rat King is about to bring down his vicious mace when the opossum rears back, roaring ferociously in pain. The Rat King loses his balance, his fat bulk tipped to the side. Cut to the back of the possum, whose legs have been hamstrung by the intrepid commander, blades crimson with the steed's gore. The commander rappels up the possum's rearing back, using his sabers as anchors as he goes. The Rat King has been dislodged from his saddle and is toppled to the ground in a heap, screaming curses as he tries to rise. His fatness and armor pin him to the muddy ground. The possum screams as the commander scales its back, stabbing it as he ascends. The beast is on its hind legs, trying fruitlessly to paw at the nuisance on its back, when the commander finally reaches its neck. Planting both feet on its shoulders, the commander raises both blades high, tips down, and plunges the blades in the opossum's head. The beast's screams are cut short, and it begins to sag. The Rat King looks up in horror as the opossum staggers, and finally begins to topple toward him. The beast's bulk rushes toward him.
No. No!
With a thud, the carcass of the mount crushes the screaming Rat King. His screams are cut short and blood seeps from the beast's gaping mouth. It is over. Rats flee in every direction, screaming in terror. Their king is dead, the battle is lost. It's every rat for himself. Nutcrackers lazily pick off fleeing rats, and toy soldiers kill the wounded on the ground. The general lies on the ground, staring up at the falling snow. Her chest heaves, and she winces. A thin line of blood runs from her nose. From her point of view, we see the commander walk up beside her, towering over her. Cut back to the general, on the ground. She grins weakly and asks,
A hand, please.
The commander stoops wordlessly and scoops up the general in his arms. She stifles a moan, but does not complain as the commander carries her off gently.
A few broken ribs, I assume. Nothing worse, General.
The general closes her eyes and swallows, panting shallowly.
I'm Violet. To you. After all this.
The commander chuckles and tenderly brushes a stray lock of gore-wet hair out of her face.
Violet, then. Just breathe. I remember what that felt like.
A wide shot of the commander walking away from the camera, the small form of the general in his arms as he marches gracefully toward the ruined fort. Cut to the lieutenant, shambling dazedly through the battlefield. Copious rats, some toy soldiers, the occasional nutcracker lay twisted and broken on the ground. Blood is everywhere. The earth is churned into a muddy mess of slush and blood. The lieutenant staggers on forward, breathing hard, his eyes fixed in the middle distance with a 1,000-yard stare. Toy soldiers are finishing off writhing rats and scooping up wounded toys to bear them away on stretchers. None of this registers with the lieutenant, who trudges on, lost inside his raging thoughts. From behind a pile of bodies, Murish pokes his head out and spies the unsuspecting lieutenant. The rat is shaken, but senses an opportunity to die with dignity. Hissing, Murish draws a stubby blade and rushes up behind the lieutenant. Hearing the soft padding through the slush, the lieutenant half turns in bewilderment. Murish, screaming bloody murder, drives the point of his knife into the lieutenant's side. The lieutenant's eyes widen as the pain hits him. He absently pushes Murish off. The rat falls to the ground, scrabbling about trying to right himself, shrieking all the while.
Oh, death! Death to you, you man-thing! May your blood join the earth and seep into the great warrens below! Filth! Filth! Filth!
There's a crack off screen, and Murish is cut off as he is struck by a bullet. He slumps over, hit in the head. The lieutenant looks down in amazement at the knife protruding from his ribs, and turns about, continuing in the direction he was going. Toy soldiers rush to him, one shoving a pistol in his belt. Having heard the rats shrieking, and try to stop the lieutenant in his tracks. The lieutenant brushes them off, wide-eyed and vacant, walks a few more steps, and then staggers. The soldiers rush to catch the lieutenant as he sinks to one knee. The lieutenant reaches up and fumbles about, and absent-mindedly draws out the knife from his ribs. The soldiers exclaim in horror and grab him up, bearing him in their arms. The lieutenant stares, mouth agape at the sky, blood gushing from his stab wound. He looks about at the soldiers weakly as they bear him off towards the fort. A tracking shot of the lieutenant as he passes a sea of faces looking down at him. His eyes are wide and staring. From the lieutenant's point of view, toy soldiers stare down in concern, nutcrackers gaze at him impassively. He is borne by the soldiers into the medical tent and laid on a cot. A flurry of medics work above him, shouting for gauze, forceps, blood. We cut to a close-up of the lieutenant. His staring eyes are becoming glassy, and a single tear runs down his dirty cheek as the medics work desperately to staunch his bleeding. Lieutenant's point of view. He cranes his neck and looks down at the foot of his bed, where stands Marius, grinning his lunatic grin, eyes blazing and hungry.
See you again soon, big brother.
Cut to another close-up of the lieutenant, neck craned, staring at the foot of his bed as the medics operate. More tears stream down his face, and he mouths a single word, anguished beyond recovery.
No.
Fade to black. Fade into the same medical tent later that evening. Night has fallen. The lieutenant is unmoving on his cot, a sheet pulled up to his chin. He breathes weakly. Silently, the commander and general enter. They both come to the foot of the lieutenant's bed. The general looks on the lieutenant's pale, feverish face. She turns her eyes to the commander, who stands with his arms clasped behind his back. The general stares pleadingly at the commander, but does not speak. A close-up on the commander's face as he stares down at the cot. He nods, almost imperceptibly. Yes. We thoroughly hope that you have enjoyed this production, a live dramatic reading of the original screenplay, March of Tin. Copyright, A Silly Little Time Productions. April 2024.